Goodness gracious, those rats are some nasty mothers, aren't they? Goodness gracious. Never met such fierce and large rats in my life. They have like front teeth that'll... Anyway, just for some context, we're joining you from the Thunderfoot Inn in the Valley of the Four Winds, where no matter how many heroes show up and help them, they always have a rat problem, it seems.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's nonstop. We've seen a couple come through here.
Yeah, it's awesome. Everybody groups together. We kill some rats. We drink some beers after. And so here we are. So this is another episode of the Valley of Spirits coming to you from another destination in Pandaria.
Yeah, well, like you said, we're going to go round robin on this, and this is the next stop.
I see why it is called Valley of the Four Winds. There's a lot of plains here. It's a lot more level of an area,
yes,
definitely, than the Jade Forest. Doesn't have spiky protrusions and mountains like that.
And it still is gorgeous. Oh, my God. I love the Weeping Willows on the rivers.
No, and if the Pandaren told you the joke, it's going to be Valley of the Five Winds after I have another beer.
Okay. All right, Jordan. Well, I don't think our listeners don't want to hear about those types of jokes. But we do have coming up our weeks. We got patches, hotfixes, any class changes, and we have some esports, and then we have our Tavern Talk just as normal every week. So, Jordan, why don't you get us started? Why don't you tell us about your week?
I got up to a couple of things. I told you guys I was probably going to be doing some mage love this next expansion, so I couldn't help but my mage did the LFR with some guildies. We'll get a little bit more into the guild experience later. But my mage did the LFR with some guildies, and then it also did the normal, just because I can't resist. I just got a blast. I got to do the blasties. I did.
Pew, pew, pew.
The evoker got a little bit of love in rating as well. I did do some normal Aberrus to try and get it the legendary. Of course, I didn't get it. It's par for the course. I helped a couple of guildies crunch through some M0s this week, and so that was a lot of fun. I helped Brother Necro bring up his Death Knight, get him some good gear, and the Legend Sully's Shaman also came along. Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it so much. Like I said, a little more to touch on this in the guildie section for sure. And so I did not play any PvP this week. None at all.
That's insane.
I would like to say I was busy or something, but I wasn't. I just crunched keys and did some LFR and then went to bed. So I did not feel the need to do my my PvP at all. So I'm kind of letting it drop for the next until season 1. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, you're taking a small break?
Yeah, from PvP specifically. I mean, I can't. WoW's like crack, so I can't.
I mean, everybody's got to get their fix. If
Yes,
I don't
of
play
course.
within 24 hours, I start getting the shivers.
I know. I start itching. I'm like, hey, so where's the internet connection? You got a Wi-Fi?
Got an internet connection?
I did actually do some Panda Remix as well.
What?
Just to get the Warlock up. The Warlock's level 48 now, so
okay.
the Warlock it's mostly just to have one, I guess. I don't know. It's definitely not my first choice of something to play in the War Within. I'm just doing it to do it. Have a Warlock. And so that's all I did. I didn't do a whole lot of Classic. I didn't do anything from Cataclysm or any hardcore. It's been, I'm a retail baby, Nick has to drag me into the Classics. So.
Yeah. It's hard to do that sometimes.
So, Nick, enough about me. What about your week in the fabulous World of Warcraft? What did you accomplish?
So, for raiding this week, I didn't get up to much. Didn't do any at all, really. Dungeons, though, I did get my Keystone Mastery, and I found it hilarious when the one that pushed me over the top, which was the first big one I did, a +8 in Oldemon Legacy, the party composition, after Blizzard took away Retribution Aura, which was supposed to reduce it to maybe 1 Ret Pally, was 2 Ret Pallies, a Holy Paladin, and a Prop Paladin, and 1 Fury Warrior. Like, we had one non-pink character. But I will say, it was fun going on the charts with the Fury War and the other Ret Pally. So that was good. But we breezed through that so easy. I actually got like 250 points added on top of my mythic score in like 1 key. So that was crazy.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so that pushed me over the edge. And I only needed like really maybe 50 points But it was great. I loved it. It was a great party that we ran through.
Ooh, you are a fellow Keystone Master.
Yes, I
How
have murdered
exciting.
for 3 seasons straight now.
Good murder. Good murder.
Yes. PvP, Panda, and Cata Classic, I didn't do anything in. I did, though, spend some time in Classic Hardcore for the Priest. I did play just a little bit. I haven't really pushed. I maybe did a level, maybe a full one. I know I dinged at least once, but I didn't push it, like a full one probably. Just because I just haven't had the want to really get back into it after losing that Paladin. It still kind of hurts a little bit, and then having to restart that grind effort, it's a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
But we're getting there. I'm hoping to push past 22, like I said. I think we're sitting still. I haven't capped it not capped it, but I haven't hit 10 yet. So, but we're pushing it. We're still in Elwyn Forest because I am being dirty and playing Alliance.
Ew.
Yeah, it's all right.
Boo.
Yeah, it's all right. All right, so that wraps up my week. Jordan, why don't you roll us into Hotfixes and tell us what we're getting new this week?
Some hotfixes. I'm going to show you guys how my reading's gotten better. Watch this. Watch this.
I know, I'm so proud of you. Green eggs and ham, you're really getting through
Green
it.
eggs and ham. So some retail hotfixes we have. We have Dungeons and Raids. Brackenide Hollow. They addressed an issue where Treemouth was incorrectly dropping to 1 HP while consuming. I mean, that actually sounds like a feature to me. Addressed an issue where Treemouth was not properly gaining Starving Frenzy when failing to consume someone in Mythic difficulty, so they buffed it again. What that means is you have to consume the tank, and I guess on Mythic, sometimes it wouldn't punish the tank if they didn't take the soak.
Oh, interesting.
And so that's like silent buffs almost, like bug fixes.
Isn't Treemouth the bark worse than my bite?
No.
Now, which one's that one?
Witherbark.
Yeah.
Brother Witherbark is, my bark is worse than my bite. Let's get to the root of the issue. Sorry, so I'll keep you guys here all night with quotes. Like,
Jordan can go for a while.
I have a lot of them. I have a lot of good ones. Moving forward, though, with retail hotfixes, Mirdracel, the Dream's Hope, Tendril, resolved an issue that causes fire beams to move in unintended directions. Yes, I didn't notice that one. I did do a bit of Tendril, but I guess that's interesting. Unintended directions. They don't even elaborate. On to quest changes. Players now can complete Others Call Me Duck Herder. The Frostbound Skytalon Dragon now does the correct amount of damage to the Scarlet Crusaders for the Death Knight quest and Into All Things. Players that are time traveling in Silithus should no longer teleport underneath the world when using the teleportation scroll while on the War Within. Interesting. So if you were purchased a copy of the War Within, your time traveling scroll would be bugged. That's goofy. Illidan Stormrage now sacrifices mages more efficiently during Ravenquest's Legacy, allowing players to complete the scenario. The Lightforged and Heritage of the Lightforged now correctly directs players to the Lightforged Beacon. So I did make a couple of jokes here about how many people this affects, but the truth of it is this means the world to the people who are trying to do these quests, and this meant a lot too. So jokes aside, thank you, Blizzard. I do appreciate it. They made some changes to, quote, the player characters. Summoning a mount now cancels Zen Flight. Excellent. Priest will now automatically restart Shadow Form after using Ride Along if Shadow Form was enabled if they become a passenger. So instead of like dropping your Shadow Form while you're riding with somebody, it just keeps that stuff. It's just quality of life. The Radiant Echoes event. We're going to talk a bunch more about this in the Tavern Talk, but we're going to gloss over some quick opinions after I read some of these changes they made. Updated the event so that now, after the zone boss is defeated, memories begin resurfacing again, repeating the event immediately. The event now rotates between zones once each hour, and while the Radiant Echoes are active in a zone, they will remain up for the entire hour. Increased earnings from scenarios and bosses, which now include Flight Stones and Crests. The event quest is now daily and account bound, was weekly per character. Dalaran Defender's gear is now eligible to be upgraded at the Creation Catalyst. So there's a bunch of exciting things to talk about here. I feel like this is Blizzard's move at this point. They make their event not very rewarding, while all the sweats will slurp it for everything it's worth. And then they're like, all right, now it's time for everybody else to do it. Now we're going to give you the right amount of stuff for bosses and stuff immediately. We'll get a little bit more into it in the Tavern Talk. But ultimately, I think this is valuable for most players. But the players that really grind this stuff right away are just going to start not doing events right away. So it's going to start skewing things if they keep a pattern of this up, if that makes sense. But there's a lot of cool quality of life here. Like, you could farm the mobs in a zone, and if you're farming effectively enough, especially if you get 2 or 3, 4 of you all together, just farming these mobs, you can farm so much of the currency so fast. You just step on everything. So I'm glad they made the bosses more meaningful and things like that. They needed to rotate the zones earlier. I can't believe they started with 90 minutes, an hour and a half.
I know. That was... when I read that, I thought it was so dumb that they started with such a gap.
They should have started with an hour. Like, this is where they should have started.
100%. An hour is more than enough time to swap zones anywhere. And it's just an hour and a half just feels like an eternity in a game like Warcraft, to be honest.
Absolutely.
I mean, shit, try doing a mythic for an hour straight when you're wiping. Like, fuck, man. There gets to be a point where it's like, nah, I'm good. Like, I'm out.
Well, and you've pressed your 5 insta-kill buttons for like an hour now, and you feel your brain literally melting. It's like, at least hours of dungeons are not mind-numbing.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? We do have some hotfixes in Season of Discovery. The Shard of Scale and Flame sets bonus, now activated by all spells, was only direct healing and spell damage originally. Animantha and Benediction now correctly be swapped. Animithra and Benediction can now properly be swapped after a 1-minute cooldown has passed. They did make some changes in Season of Discovery to dungeons and raids, starting with exclusively Molten Core. Fixed an issue that prevented Shazra from casting the Gate of Shazra twice in a row on Heat 3. Ragnaros no longer submerges twice on Heat 1. Baron Geddon now casts Armageddon at 5%, on Heat 1 was 10%. Baron Geddon now casts 2 Living Bombs at the same time, on Heat 2 it was 3. Living Bomb no longer leaves living Fallout pools on Heat 1. Flamewalker Protectors now cast Dominate Mind less frequently. Maximize the cast and recast times of several Dispel mechanics. Damage done to self with spells like Hellfire is no longer increased by the low fire resistance effects on heat levels 2 and 3 in Molten Core. Players no longer line of sight Flamewalker Priests from Sulfuron Harbinger or outrange them to prevent the cast of Dark Mending. It must be interrupted. Adjust the recast time and cooldown of Dark Mending so players can interrupt more sufficiently. Some item changes in Season of Discovery. Further increased drop chances of Libram of Resilience from various sources in the world. Added a chance for Libram of Veracity, Rapidity, and Resilience to appear in the damaged Undermine supply crates purchased with the Tarnished Undermine reels. Essence of the Pure Flame will now show its reflect damage in the combat log. Hydraxian Coronation now binds the target with a piece of gear. The Alliance quest, End of the Dark Horde, is now given by Master Matthias Shaw, was given by General Marcus Jonathan. Overcharged rune can now be obtained by those previously completed in the Discovery, but did not get the rune. Fine Flare Clove gloves are no longer class restricted. And so some of this, I guess I'll just take a brief moment on this. I do get there is a lot of the community that really likes these changes, and there's a lot of the community that is really frustrated with these changes. Because there's some that is, yeah, this is a lot of quality of life. This is actually really cool to see them focusing on what could they make Molten Core if they could again. Is really exciting. The problem is it's not very classic anymore. Like, them nerfing all the fire resistances, like that was like the shit. You didn't even have to be good if you had good fire resistance. Like, so it takes out some of the classic aspects, which I think is interesting. Like, I'm not a classic guy. You guys know. I'm huge retail. I play retail because I feel like they made the changes for a reason. So I find it interesting. This classic experience is kind of not really vanilla at all anymore. And so it's kind of interesting. I guess, yeah, leave in the comments how you feel about Season of Discovery and what you think that they should do, for sure. Thank you for listening. So some changes in Cataclysm Classic. Conquest is now purchasable from the Valor vendor at 250 Conquest per 250 Valor. Honor is now purchasable from the Justice Commodities vendor at 250 Honor per 325 Justice. Justice is now purchasable from the Honor Commodities vendor for 250 Justice per 375 Honor. Maelstrom crystals are available from the Justice Good vendors, Togar and Orgrimmar and Telric, Forthright in Stormwind City. Some rare elite mobs and Cataclysm zones have started dropping item level 359 epic gear. These include Moba, Scar, Zariana, Akmahat, and Jalak Doom. All Midsummer items can now be refunded as intended. Brazier of the Dancing Flames and the Captured Flame. Fixed an issue where ritual Taki masks were invisible and non-targetable in Zul'Gurub. I think it's interesting how they're playing with the Valor Conquest balance. Like, you can trade PvP currency for PvE currency. Like, that's kind of weird. Like, imagine if you had Honor, so you could trade it for things like Flight Stones and Crests, as you played enough PvP. That's essentially what they're doing. So they're testing on you guys, Cataclysm Classic players, to see if this is something they can bring to Poppy Retail. I think that's interesting. I don't think they can. I don't think it's very good. Well, let me give both sides. I don't think it's very good to give. You just got to be careful with if the best way for me to get a player versus environment piece is to go do Battlegrounds, you done fucked up. Like, why am I not getting the best gear for dungeons from doing dungeons? So you have to, this balance has to be very careful here. But it's interesting. We'll see how it goes. I have a Cataclysm Classic player in my pocket that I will talk with about it for sure.
Oh, who's
They
that?
must not be named at this time, but I definitely have somebody who plays some Cataclysm Classic for sure. So, Nick, I think I have achieved the ultimate end of what I can read. I did get reading glasses today.
Oh,
so
trifocals? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's sweet. Yeah, it's sometimes it's a little kaleidoscopy, but you know.
In reality, all it is two kaleidoscopes that you're sitting there trying to just turn.
And so,
why do the letters keep moving?
Nick, will you bring us into some class changes?
Yes, definitely. All right, so for retail, Hunter corrected an issue causing the application of Killzone's debuff to interrupt casts and channels. For Restoration Druid, an issue is fixed that caused Mastery, Harmony to increase healing as if one additional stack was always present. Moving into Season of Discovery, Mage, Master Generation range for detecting allies to heal increased to 43 yards, previously was 30, to eliminate the situation where it was possible to heal others who were outside the range for your heal to apply to yourself.
Yeah, so I guess I can break this one down.
Yeah, go for it.
But they essentially gave you a 43-yard range instead of creating the situation where you have to remove yourself from the range in order to mass heal them.
Yeah.
So they just fixed a barrier issue.
It makes sense. I have to explain it. For Priest, Homunculi now casts and stacks Sunder armor relative to the rank they would have if they were a warrior of their level. A developer's note, this takes place of their casting degrade previously. Now a friendly warrior can refresh a Homunculi 5 stack of Sunder armor. The strength of this debuff at max level is unchanged. Spirit of the Redeemer will now correctly put pain suppression and dispersion on a 2-minute cooldown, previously it was a 5-minute. For Hunter, Killshot will now have an increased range with the Hawkeye talent. Hunters also can no longer place multiples of the same trap by unequipping Trap Launcher and placing the trap. Shaman, the Elemental Tier 1 6-piece bonus, will now correctly refresh Flame Shock to 18 seconds if Burn is engraved. The Spirit Wolf summoned by Feral Spirits should now display all 4 of their active abilities on their pet bar. For Warlock, Mage's Bellfire Bolt can no longer damage targets affected by Banish. They will be immune. For Warrior, the Tier 1 Warrior 2-piece set bonus, Tactician will now correctly reduce the cost of Meathook. Jordan, I believe we have some holidays coming up this week. Can you please tell us what we can expect?
More events, not so much holidays, but yes, I do have some. We'll start with the sadness. Well, maybe. Some events are ending. The Dragonflight Dungeon event ends. So if you were doing Mythic Zeros, for example, or Heroics, or things like that, the last boss dropping an extra piece of gear has ended. It was a good time to gear up like a mid-range character. It's not really the best event. I wouldn't feel like you missed out on a whole lot.
No,
Especially
it was a good opportunity.
We have a new expansion coming out soon, so.
Right.
We also have the PvP Brawl Deep 6 ends. I'm not the biggest fan of this one, so if you guys feel for this one, I'm sorry, but I am okay with it leaving. But we do have the Legion Time Walking event, which is a great time for leveling. It also gives you a decent pathway to gear in Season 4. If you are trying to get to like 480 to get ready to be able to start getting to your 70, 76, or 75, 76 level, for example, this is a good time to start getting. You want to try to be about 480 before the War Within launches. Other than that, you're playing at your fun at your own leisure at this point. But a Time Walking Dungeon is a very good way to get you to 480. But we also have the PvP Brawl Arathi Blizzard, which is essentially Arathi Basin, except it is snowing, the lakes are frozen over, there's slow spots. A little bit of a quirky event. I think it's fine. I would never have been a huge fan of the river separations in PvP. Like I said, I haven't played any this week. Didn't play a single lick of it, so take it with a grain of salt. But I do like the frozen over rivers and things like that. Kind of interesting. Changes Arathi Basin a little bit. Oh, I get to call you out a little bit. Nick actually did some research on the esports this week. Nick, would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so as we talked about the last couple of weeks, there has been the Dungeon Dojo Invitational event going on, and we just want to share the results of that. So they do separate leagues. It depends on the play style of the group. Some people want to get super sweaty and push really hard, and other people just want to help raise money. So for the Dalaran League, Hoefenhagen Reforged ended up winning it with 6,322 score. Ogremar's League, Starship Fuchsia ended up with 12,462.5. Under the Stormwind League, Sad Kids. Sad Kids ended up with 12,922.5. And just so you're aware, the way that they do their scoring, it depends on the keys that you complete and the time frame. So a 2 gives you 250 points, a 3 gives you 375, a 4 gives you 500, and so forth down the line. Every team had 2 chunks of 3 hours, one per day, in order to complete as many dungeons as they could off one key. And so these are just the results of this. As we had said last week, they raised over $6,500 for Make-A-Wish Foundation, a fantastic organization. And I'm really happy that our community in a non-Blizzard event is able to put on this, and that our community is able to attain something for other people to that volume. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, definitely. Shout out to Raider.io for organizing this and making this charity event possible. Excellent work. I hope to see more things from our community.
Yep. And so that's all for the esports this week. Nothing a lot to cover. We just wanted to give you what the results were, because I know last week when we recorded, they weren't out yet because I still had a day to go on it. But that wraps it up.
I'll get started with the affixes for this week. Everybody's topic. We need to get like a soundboard where it's like, boo, affixes, boo. You know? So for the affixes this week, we have fortified, storming, and bursting. Non-boss enemies will have 20% more health and inflict up to 30% increased damage. So fortified week. Remember that it is trash week. Your big pulls are going to need interrupts, and they're going to last a bit longer. So remember, go easy on trash pulls. If you don't have a concise group with good communication, I would go easier than you were this week on the first pull. And then we have storming. While in combat, enemies periodically summon damaging whirlwinds. This one's pretty tame. I would say it's a little more annoying than like volcanic because they move around, but not so bad. Mostly trouble for ranged. Melee, obviously, you just move a little bit and keep slapping, right? And then we have bursting. This one is tricky. This is the tricky affix. When slain, non-boss enemies explode, causing all players to suffer 10% of their max health and damage over 4 seconds. This effect stacks. Something to keep in mind, healers. This is dispellable. Dispel yourselves. You can't heal the group if your ass is dead. Dispel yourself. But you can't dispel all 5 of them unless you're a priest, Dab, right? Hopefully you don't need mana. But bursting is tricky. It makes sure that on a higher level pull, you need to watch when things are dying. You can't pull huge groups because it'll seem like it's going fine, and then once people start dying, it's a game over. Once 10 of those mobs die, any 10 of those, that is 100% of your health over 4 seconds. So now if there's 22 of them, that's 220% of your health over 4 seconds. Your healer can't do that. So just some things to keep in mind. Bursting is a wake-up call. Make sure you slow your pulls down at 10 and higher for sure. But speaking of affixes, Nick, I was wondering if you would read us through this read-through of the new Xalatath affixes.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to go verbatim on the blue text. Sorry, might be boring.
I wanted Nick, because he can read and shit, right? So I wanted him to go over the dry rub, the literally reading exactly what Blizzard's intentions were.
Greeting, Dungeoneers. This week's beta update includes major changes to the Mythic Keystone Affix system in the War Within. Based on player feedback, our primary goal with these updates is to refine the Mythic Plus experience to better serve a diverse player base. Previously, we approached Mythic Keystones with a one-size-fits-all approach, which proved challenging in striking the right balance and limited our design space. In this new build, you'll see significant shifts in our design philosophy. We recognize the importance of weekly variety of those progressing through the system. However, for players pushing high keys, the variants sometimes felt restrictive. We've also heard your feedback about wanting affixes with both positive and negative effects, as well as a desire for thematic nods similar to past affixes. This update to the affix system aims to meet those diverse expectations. We're maintaining the core goals of our last round of changes without the limitations of a one-size-fits-all approach. The flexibility allows us to craft a more tailored experience for each player of different playstyles. Let's dive into the revamped affix system. For the affixed update overview, we're reducing the total number of mechanical affixes on a keystone for players progressing through the system from 2 to 1. The following affixes will be retired from the War Within: Sanguine, Bolstering, Raging, and Bursting. We've heard feedback that applying bonuses unequivocally to players feels exclusionary regardless of overall impact. Affixes that were part of the last Mythic Keystone test will no longer apply to Keystones. The following: Recklessness, Focused, Attuned, and Thorned. Our one bucket of active affixes for players progressing through the system offers a variety with positive effects for executing these affixes that apply more evenly. We're reintroducing thematic elements to affixes by invoking Xalatath and Mythic Keystones with their own set of affixes. We're utilizing passive affixes to signpost expected increases in player mastery and commensurate rewards as players progress through the Mythic Keystone system. We're aiming to eliminate push weeks by providing a consistent challenge that focuses solely on the dungeon for players seeking to advance deeper into Mythic Keystone systems for scores and titles. I do and don't like it because a push week is actually kind of nice, but also I can understand how they want it to be evenly across the board.
They want you to have a reason to play every week.
Exactly.
It makes perfect sense.
Well, it goes with, like I said, I did 1 +8 and it pushed me 200 points up. The week prior, I could do a +8, +10, and I maybe got like a point. So I can understand why they would want to even it out 100%.
This is kind of an interesting episode because this topic is so huge and so massive that I would say we're not technically in a Tavern Talk because we're staying really technical, especially as we're going to be talking about it. But I do feel like this is our first Tavern Talk section as well. So, sorry for a little bit of this reading. We just didn't want to misrepresent
Blizzard.
Blizzard.
You're a Blizzard, Harry.
We didn't want to misrepresent Blizzard's intentions in any way. So, a bit of this is boring. Nick is literally reading this enormous text block verbatim.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about it. It'll get a little bit more exciting and a little fruitier. But we wanted to make sure that we are displaying the changes in the best way we can. So bear with us a little longer. Thank you, Nick, for reading.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I appreciate it. But yeah, so the new affixes.
For the new affixes, starting at a keystone level 2, Xalatath herself will manifest in dungeons, introducing a rotation of affixes under the banner Xalatath's Bargain. These affixes not only seek to empower the dungeon's denizens, but also grant players the opportunity to harness their effects. For our first test this week, we'll have 2 Xalatath's Bargains affixes available. One affix is an event that players must deal with periodically, while the other affixes a passive effect on creatures throughout the dungeon. Xalatath's Bargain Ascendant. While in combat, Xalatath rains down orbs of cosmetic energy that attempt to empower nearby enemies, increasing their haste and movement speed. If players disrupt these orbs, they claim the effect for themselves.
So we do want to talk about these Xalatath bargains. There is 2 of them. There is Xalatath Bargain Ascendant and Xalatath Bargain Frenzied. So when they talk about Xalatath Bargain, that means both of these things are applied to the dungeon. And so that was just one. That was just Ascendant. Nick, would you read to us what the other half of this is? The Frenzied.
The other one we're going to see is Xalatath's Bargain Frenzied. Non-boss enemies become frenzied at 30% health remaining, increasing their haste by 40%, but increasing their damage taken by 20%. Starting at Keystone Level 7, a new affix, Challenges Peril, directly affects the dungeon tavern. This affix emphasizes precise play and strategic execution, placing greater risk on players' decisions. Challenges Peril. Dying subtracts 15 seconds from the time remaining rather than 5 seconds, so that's a big increase. Starting at Keystone Level 12, a new affix replaces the Xalatath Bargain affixes. At this level, Xalatath revokes her bargains, empowering dungeon creatures with a 20% increase in health and damage. Xalatath's Guile. Xalatath betrays players, revoking her bargains and increasing the health and damage of enemies by 20%. Moving into Fortified and Tyrannical, they now are serving as milestone affixes that are alternating between Keystone levels 4 and 10 on a weekly rotation. We feel these provide us with a clear point in the system where increases in difficulty and rewards occur. This also affords more decision between key levels for players progressing through the system on a consistent week-to-week experience for players progressing deeper into the Mythic Keystone system. To summarize all this up, for a weekly rotation, what we're going to see on a +2 through an 11 are the following. On a +2, Xalatath Bargain affixes are going to appear on a weekly rotation. On a +4, we will have Fortified or Tyrannical activated, altering on a weekly rotation. A +7, Challenges Peril is activated on all Keystones. On a +10, Tyrannical and Fortified are active. From Keystone levels 12 and up, Keystones have the following affixes: Fortified, Challenges Peril, Tyrannical, and Xalatath's Guile replaces the weekly Xalatath Bargain affix. So the question is, with all these new changes, how are they going to score this? So the dungeon scoring. They are evaluating how the scoring is going to be generated under this new model. Verbatim, we believe these changes, along with our heroic and mythic dungeon challenges, provide players with a way to engage with dungeon in a setting that they prefer. This is a fresh look at Mythic Plus, and we look forward to your feedback and continuing discussions on the affixes and overall system changes. We'll see you in the dungeons. So, to pull from it, they're doing a lot of changes. Please check it out. If there are things that you are noticing that are incorrect or you don't like, please communicate it to Blizzard. Otherwise, they're going to get permanent, and then we're going to have a harder time changing stuff.
Well, the truth is, be active in your communities.
Yeah,
Definitely.
100%. We need to be active on this stuff. I mean, and then we can see that by being active in this already, this is where we've gotten to as well. And I think this is actually
Really cool concepts. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think this is a solid concept for how they're going about these changes. Jordan, what do you think about it overall?
So there isn't really a clear-cut way to make our way to the Tavern Talk section quite this episode. So I guess I'll call it here before I dive into it. Welcome to the Tavern Talk.
Here we are.
So, Nick, it takes a lot of guts to come up and have a group of individuals come together and unionize a company. So, Blizzard, I wanted to say that I appreciate the fact that you could unionize, and that's insane. I
No,
really love
100%.
the developers that make this game, and so to be honest with you, to the developers.
Yes, and I'm glad you have a union now.
Yeah, excellent. I'm glad you have representation. But anyway, let's take a drink. We promised. All right, so now we're getting hot into the Tavern Talk.
Woo,
I'm
let's go.
glad we sugar-coated the Blizzard devs for this. So I wanted to break down a little bit about Xal'atath's bargain. There's a little bit of misunderstanding. You know how we flopped between Fortified and Tyrannical? We're going to be flopping between Xal'atath Frenzied and Xal'atath Ascendant, going back and forth. You know, this is more of you're going to have a week where you deal with standing in circles that are going towards the enemies, or you're going to have a week where trash is hard. It's not that different from Fortified. It's a little bit more engaging. So ultimately, I'm okay with Xal'atath's bargain. I think it's okay. It's not that much different from Tyrannical Fortified. I was okay with Tyrannical Fortified. Now, mind you, these affixes are coming back to haunt you. So let's talk about what happens at level 4. They are going to flip Tyrannical and Fortified. Of course, when you have Xal'atath Frenzied, non-boss enemies becoming frenzied at 30% health, right? So they're not gonna double buff non-boss enemies. So Tyrannical and Frenzied are always gonna be together, and Fortified and Ascendant will always be together. But you only get one Fortified or Tyrannical at a key level 4. So I see why they did that. It's a bit complicated. Like, this is not easier to be prepared for affixes. That's my biggest complaint. Like, you have to do all this math and switching in and out to be ready for every week. Once we get used to it, I think it'll be better, right? Like, it's Ascendant week, so, we have Tyrannical, right? It's going to become, we're going to be used to it. Once you get to it. And the reason why this is a good concept is because it's not like the whole dungeon is based on it being fortified that week. Instead, you have level 2s and 3s that where Fortified is the only really tough thing. You have tough trash this week.
Right.
But then you get Tyrannical. Now the bosses are hard. Now the whole dungeon level scales up a bit harder. Way more incrementally than it did before.
Well, and I think, too, the interesting thing that we're having is people have to also be more vigilant on some of these Xal'atath affixes. Like the one where they drop the orbs and whatnot for the haste buff. Like, you have to go catch those now. And so that's going to make it just as challenging as you had when you had like an incorporeal or what the hell was the other one? The afflicted.
Yeah.
Like, you had to keep an eye out for those. And there were times where, like, yeah, I had to pull off there's sometimes where, yeah, I can keep doing damage. I pop out for 1 second of my rotation, slap cleanse on an affix to like, or on a afflicted to help you,
right,
and then go back in. But
there's
there's
a
other
huge
times where
difference
it's like,
here, though.
that motherfucker spawns on the other side of the room, and I'm like, okay, I gotta run over, do it, and run back.
The huge difference is none of the things I've talked about are class specific. Every single class in the game can help with these affixes so far.
So that means if someone's slacking, they're slacking.
Well,
there's no excuse.
It gives everybody an opportunity to help their team.
It means you could play Warrior again.
Well, the Holy Trinity's coming back. We're getting back to that.
Can you explain the Holy Trinity for people who may not know?
So the Holy Trinity is you have a purpose-built person that is designed to take damage. You have one, maybe two of them, depending on whatever game or scenario. And you have a person that their sole job is to scream obscenities at the enemies and make sure that they're always hitting him, and then he mitigates. Then we have the second tier. We have the damage tier. The guys that pump. They just literally murder. They do nothing else. They stand in shit. Sometimes. No, not to say anything. There are some legendary DPS with some interrupts out there. We don't have to get into all that. But there are... So then there's the next tier, which is just dealing damage. You exist to make sure the boss dies in the right amount of time. And then you have the healer, which keeps everybody alive. And so I call this... A lot of people call this what we call the Holy Trinity concept. things that Guild Wars and Final Fantasy have tried to break away from. Have more of like support classes, damage classes, tankier classes, make this more blurry. But WoW embraces the Holy Trinity. And I like that. It's why I play World of Warcraft, to be honest with you.
It's one of the great things about it.
So bringing us back to the incremental changes, we do get Challenger's Peril. Starting at level 7, you will get what is called Challenger's Peril. So this is a real simple concept to understand. When you die in a key dungeon, you get 5 seconds subtracted from your timer, right? Now, when you're playing on a +7 or higher, you now get 15 seconds subtracted.
Yeah, it's 3 times the amount.
So I absolutely love it. You can't cheese deaths. You can't pull too hard. It is... Challenger's Peril is a good name.
Yeah, well, and like it goes back to what they said too. It starts, they wanted this to start making people have to think strategically inside the dungeon. And what we've talked about a lot too in the past couple weeks is a lot of the changes they have made to the game in general, not just the Mythic dungeons, have been to try to push us back to that classic. I say classic, but I don't mean like vanilla. I just mean that original intent of how a dungeon or a raid is supposed to be.
Refining the Holy Trinity, right?
Yeah, exactly how you put it. Yeah, refining the Holy Trinity. Just getting back to that love of being strategic in the game and not just like, well, the tank's just going to go pull whatever and damage do whatever and healer's going to walk right through. And then maybe when you get the higher keys, you're like actually having to heal.
Challenger's Peril is interesting. It punishes you more for death, so don't stand and stuff. 7s and on. That's honestly all I can tell you, right? Like, don't fuck up mechanics. It now, instead of 5-second penalty, it's 15. Wake up. Deaths are not cool anymore. You know?
Right.
And so then starting at level 10s, you remember how I spoke earlier? They're going to line up the affixes depending on whether you have what Xal'atath's bargain you have. They're going to line up fortified or tyrannical at 4. Once you get to 10, you get the other one also. Now you're tyrannical and fortified. If you're playing a 10 key, you get both. Accept it. It's part of your life now. The dungeon is fortified and tyrannical. Mind you, we are encroaching on very sweaty territory. We are encroaching on the point where a very small amount of the player base will experience this kind of thing. So let's get on to the last thing. What happens when you get to 12s and higher? You know, I'm glad I got my pedestal for that. I wonder how many people are going to play, how many actual separate people are going to play 12s and higher.
Right.
But Xal'atath's bargain is gone. Forget about it. It's gone. You don't have to worry about it anymore. It's sweet. You're a 12 now. You're a big boy. You have Xal'atath's Guile instead. Xal'atath betrays players, revoking her bargains, increasing the health and damage of enemies by 20%. Blanket statement. Every single being, every single mob in that dungeon gets 20% more damage and 20% more health. All of them. Every single one. So 12s and higher, it is wake up time. They don't want people getting to 21s, 22s, 23s anymore. And I think this is their way to deal with that. You can already get all the best gear, all the mythic track gear at 10s. You know what? Here's 12s and higher, you sweats. I feel like that's what they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, okay, you guys want something hard? I'll show you something hard. Here's 20% more. And I think they're gonna crank this up. Like, we're gonna see things like 35% increased damage and health. Like, they're gonna crank this up. That's their sweat, and it's a cool idea. They essentially have a sweat gauge. You know what I mean? You have all these affixes to deal with. You do them all fine. Let's just turn it up till it's impossible. So I dig it. To be honest with you, I'm not sure if it's better than the current affix system or not. But I think it's a really good attempt. Like, this is really interesting concepts and things they're taking into this.
Yeah, no, I think what they're doing is fantastic. I'm excited to see how it goes together and how it is in a dungeon. Like, I'm
I think
pumped
they
to
are
see
too.
these changes.
Well, I think that's all we want to talk about with the new affixes. There's a lot of movement. Movement is going to be a huge thing. And so let's talk about how much fun the pre-patch event has been. Nick, do you want to talk about your experience with the pre-patch event first? Why don't you start us?
Well, so before the changes that we've talked about earlier came into effect, the pre-patch event put me to sleep.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was boring. It was not fun. I found it to be grinding feely. Um, it was cool when it popped off, but then I gotta wait an hour and a half to do it again. Well, I don't want to go sit there and like run around and spam the same spells, 500 or 600 times just to gain more of the whatever it is. So I thought it was a bit boring. I thought that it was uninteresting. I've heard now that's after the fixes that it's actually enjoyable.
And
Jordan, what did you think about it?
we even talked a little bit beforehand, before we even started this, about how now they increased all the, for when you do the actual event, when you kill the fucking boss of the event, now they increased how much of the currency you get. It's like, guys, come on. And then that now they're like, yeah, it's an hour in between every event. It's like, that's where it should have started,
Right. No,
guys.
100%.
Like, an hour, 90 minutes. What? You expect me to melt my brain against the wall and hunt mobs and call it a good pre-patch event? Like, come on. I wasn't impressed. I just, I would have been more impressed if they gave us more incentives to play the stuff they already had out instead of doing this. I'll be honest with you. Like,
No,
if they were like, yo, pick a reputation and you get 100% increased reputation with this Dragonflight faction, I would have been more excited about that than this pre-patch event.
yes, 100%.
And this took development. This took new skin ideas. This took a new vendor table. This took so much development, and it's so not fun to do.
it was
I don't know
not
how to put it
fun.
lightly.
It felt so I know I'm gonna say it repeatedly, but it felt so boring. I mean, I was going around killing all the little ghosts and whatnot and getting to the stuff for the pre-patch event, and I was like, man, this is just fucking
I mean, we are
dull.
in slow time. We got to remember we're in slow time.
Right, I get that.
But, man, this is pretty fucking slow time, I guess. God damn. So, it is worth it to do it. You get a lot of 480 gear real quickly. There is a lot of good reasons to do it, to prepare yourself for Dragonflight. I'm just really disappointed with the experience. I think the incentives are there. Now that they balance the bosses out, this next week's going to be a better pre-patch for us, for sure. I just can't believe how much testing and how much information they have, and they have put us on a 90-minute rotation. It's like, guys, did you not play it? Do you play
Right.
this game?
Yeah, exactly. And it's even like a 90-minute rotation in this game feels like an eternity.
Right, like, I could get into a queue as a mage in that time. Probably two of them, even. Like, dang. So, it's not very engaging, but it is rewarding. So, I guess, Blizzard, in my opinion, if you're listening, Daddy Blizzard, the balance was off. Rewards were there. Experience was not.
Yeah.
So we poopy stinky the pre-patch event. Now, mind you, there are so many things to experience in World of Warcraft that are not the pre-patch event. We are very excited for the War Within. Don't want to let us poopy stinky. We are going full steam ahead for the War Within. But we do have another little a stinkier topic. What does it feel like to raid in dungeon right now in the end of season 4 of Dragonflight?
You can take this one first.
I'm always been a proprietor of making sure that we are open and teaching people the mechanics. I don't expect people at this point in the season, if they don't have gear, to know the raid, for example. That they are getting gear, they're getting ready for the War Within. I understand. They are trying to get their bearings on raiding again. My problem is with people coming back, as in quite of a volume that they are, is that they act like they know what Dragonflight was like. It's like, no, dude, you're talking Legion. You're talking Battle for Azeroth. You're talking Shadowlands. Like, no, Dragonflight, brother. It's like, guys, I've never had so many people show up and deal no damage and act like they know the game. I just don't know.
God.
I just don't even know how that even happens. Like, I blast the damage chart, and they're like, oh, well, I interrupted, and I blast the interrupt chart, and Sully, a shout-out if you're listening, Sully. But Sully has like 55 million and they have like 4. It's like, come on, dude.
Yep.
If you said you were coming back or you were fresh, or if you said, hey, sorry guys, I didn't get enough interrupts, or hey, sorry I didn't have a lot of damage, it's like, you know what, dude? No, it's great. We have this guild. It's called the Electric Boogaloo. You're absolutely welcome. But the amount of, oh, healer's trash, when the guy did less than the tank in damage, it's like, dude, no, the healer didn't choose you. Sorry. That's what happened here. I'm sorry you can't understand or see it. And so there's so much pointing the finger happening in modern dungeons right now. Because I want to help these people learn the game. And I'm trying to help these people learn the game. Which is, guys, be open to input.
Yeah, I think it's very hard for some people to do that too. Makes it difficult.
I guess maybe this is easier for me. Like, at the end of a dungeon, on my mage the other day, I got it. By the way, I totally pumped this group up. Me and Sully were just trying to get keys done. And so I pumped this group up heavy. Of course I'm like a 504 mage with a 525 mage and a 524 paladin. Like, there's no way I'm competing with these monsters, right? But even at the end of the dungeon, I said, hey guys, thanks for coming. Sorry I was the weakest link. They're like, nah, dude, you fine. Like, pats me on the back. It's like, that is a relationship in a dungeon. Yes. Why do I have people that are not... Like, it was easy for me. These are very good players that were very prepared for this, and I had a great experience with them. Why can't other bad DPS have this experience? Why can't they understand you? Why do they play the blame game? Man, it's frustrating.
Well, it's because people have to feel like they're superior at the game or whatnot, and...
Because my mage has plenty of times where they do just fine, and nobody says anything. It's great. Just crazy.
No, it is. It's crazy, but it's also very frustrating trying to be those people that want to help and learn, and then there's people out there that give the community a bad name just by being toxic assholes.
Or the guy who missed the mechanic. I say in chat, I'll break everything down for everybody. Frog Boss is famous in Halls of Infusion. I can never remember his name, but Frog Boss, where you have to kite the frogs into the guy and eat them. Famous for wiping groups. And so I explain things like the tank has to tank the circle. One player has to do it. It should be the tank, right? And then as many frogs as you can get into it, you can. And this concept alone has made me question my sanity when leading groups.
Yeah.
It's not like that complicated. But just how much people will not take accountability. It's absolutely crazy. Like, Sully, I hope you're still listening, but we have multiple groups where we will mention, oh, that wipe was my fault. Guys, I'm sorry. Nah, like, nope, I fucked up. Sorry, that was my bad. Like, we are like, what is this healer doing? He should have known I was bad. It's like, we're not like that. Right. It's like, how did these people happen? So frustrating.
No, it is. It's completely frustrating when you start getting people that want to... I mean, nitpicking is good, and accepting accountability for your own faults during a raid or a dungeon are highly commendable, because it means you're understanding it and you're taking the accountability and you're going, hey, I screwed up. I'm going to do better. It's trying to improve. That's where that is fantastic to see, whether it's someone who's brand new and just learning mechanics or learning how this stuff works, or it's a veteran player that's done it for years and is like, I've done this, clear 5 or 6 times and I'm screwing up today just because I have an off day. It happens. But it's incredibly frustrating to have people that just shit on each other because, oh, you took that damage and you weren't supposed to, kind of stuff, or whatever it is. It's just... And I think it disheartens people, too, from wanting to learn.
I do think a part of it's mindset. Like, you're coming into World of Warcraft. This game, we just had a whole episode. Definitely listen to it if you haven't. But we have a whole episode about why you can't play this game on a controller. It is it is not easy. And the game, honestly, does not teach you how to play it. I've talked about that time and time again. This game is not easy to learn. Once you get past the curve, it's sweet. But it is not easy to learn. Where was I going?
No, it's not, and you're absolutely right. Like, I don't think that WoW should never be on that. Not to bring last episode back up, but WoW cannot. I don't believe it can go on a controller format and be as that dumbed down as they need it to be. Not that console players are dumb or anything, but it has to get dumbed down to be on a controller because you only have so many buttons.
Well, I think I covered most of the stuff I wanted to cover in that. We're in a weak point. There is a lot of people not, like all the crunchy, really cool dudes right now are probably not playing dungeons right at this second, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so
I'm
we
sure
are
they're
at a
taking the
unique
break.
point in time. Well, people are right now like, they're loading up the slingshot for the war within, right?
Right.
And so it's interesting. I just wanted to let everybody know that people really are trying to help you. We're not insulting you.
No, and especially if you are to, it isn't just join our guild, but like if you do end up joining, whether it's the community or the guild, or you do a couple with us just wanting to learn and you don't want to actually join anything, we're happy to help too. We're
Absolutely.
serious when we say we want to build a community, we want to better our community.
That's what Warcraft was. It's a community game.
Yep.
That's what we're trying to make it again. So I do appreciate you guys listening so much. But Nick, would you send us out, brother?
Yes. Thank you for tuning in to another exciting episode of the Valley of Spirits. We're your hosts, Jordan and Nick, your go-to Horde players. Join us in Valdrakken on the Mal'Ganis server and look up our guild, the Electric Boogaloo, for some epic adventures. Stay connected with us on social media. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or X as it's known these days. You can also find us on YouTube by searching for the Valley of Spirits podcast. Do not miss out on our latest episode, behind the scenes content, and more. Until next time, may your quest be glorious and your loot be plentiful. And as always, for the
the
whole.
Horde.